The subject we are continue to discuss is disputation regarding through documentation or validation of documentation. We are on page 20b. Mishna. זה אומר כתב ידי וזה כתב ידו של חברי וזה אומר זה כתב ידי וזה כתב ידו של חברי הרי אלו נאמנים. We have here a story with the witnesses. You have a document. And obviously, when it's come to documentation, part of the process is the signatories. So here we are with the Shulchan Aruch with the code, Choshen Mishpat, chapter 46. I just paraphrase using the Koran edition of the English translation. If the two witnesses come to authenticate their signatures, and each one said, "This is my handwriting, and that is the handwriting of my fellow witness," they are deemed credible. Moreover, the document is rectified even if each authenticates only his own signature, provided that they are remember the events recorded in the document. Just remember that statement. That's basically follow the Rambam. Rambam, it's a Sefer Shoftim, Hilchot Edut, chapter 6. Rambam rule follow the opinion of the sages, which we're about to read in the Mishnah, disputed the Rabbi Dr. But Tosfot, the Rosh, the Tur say that the document is ratified even if the witnesses do not remember the incident and they testified about the signatures alone, provided that an additional witness testified with regard to both signatures. This ensures that there will be two witnesses for each signature. So here is the story. You have here the two witnesses. They came to sign the document. One said, "This is my handwriting. I recognize it." You show them, "This is my handwriting." But here is the touchy point. You see that one of them said not just about his signature, he talked about the other fellow, and he said, "This is the signature of my fellow." So since you have two witnesses that affirm each signatures, therefore it's effective, it's credible. However, זה אומר, זה כתב ידי, וזה אומר, זה כתב ידי, meaning neither one of them recognize the signature of the other, צריכים לצרף עמהן אחר, דברי רבי. Rabbi Dr. said you have to add another person, which is each one of them testified over his signature. That's not sufficient. You do need to have another person to sign up. והחכמים אומרים, and the sages disputed, and they said, אינם צריכים לצרף עמהן אחר. They do not need to add another witness with them. אלא, rather, נאמן אדם לומר, זה כתב ידי. A person is deemed credible to say, "This is my handwriting." So the Takanat Chachamim, the decree of the sages, the big question when it's come to a signature, number one, to make sure that it's not mezuyaf, that it's real, the person. As you all know, in the modern days, you go to a bank, some banks require you to sign in all different forms, in all different ways you're signing, with the middle name, without middle name, with the hands, a certain position, with your fingers, with all different ways to make sure that it is real you, especially when it's come to recognize or it's in the trust. Now, the question is, do you meant to say that the testimony applies to the signature, that it's real credible one, or it's the two witnesses that come and testify over the act itself, of the matter itself? כשתמצא לומר לדברי רבי, when you come to say, according to the view of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, page 21, על כתב ידם הם מעידים, their witnesses are testifying about their handwriting and basically prove the idea that the signature is really authentic. And Rashi tells us, I'm reading Rashi, שתעמוד לסוף דבר כסבר, על כתב ידו הם באים להעיד כשמקיימים השטר בבית דין, לפיכך צריך שניים על כל כתב וכתב. Which is, Rashi said that since each signature, considering as independent eidut, independent witnesses, therefore you need to have two witnesses for each and every signature. And that's the way the student of Rabbeinu Yonah explained Rashi. Versus ledivrei chachamim, according to our sages, al maneh, which is 100 zuz or any other currency or transaction, shebashtar hemeidim, which is the document saying that this is our handwriting. It is like they are saying, we saw the lending documentation and we signed over that document. So therefore, in that avenue of the sages, it is sufficient to have one witness to each and every signature, because you do have two witnesses for the whole concept of the loan, that it's one single item. So there are several points here. Tosfot tells us that even the witnesses do not remember clearly with details the loan. Imagine a situation if it's one of the big amach, big organization, that lending to many people. And each case you have witnesses. And they are doing it so many times and so many people, they not always remember the details, just as an example. So even those witnesses do not remember the detail of the loan, the sages hold that when they testified over the signatures and they approve them, in that area it's considering the same equivalent as the testified over the loan itself. So even they remember the loan, Rebbe hold that it's not enough to testify over the loan. Why? Because we differentiate between milveh al peh le milveh al shtar. Al peh meaning you, like in the jewelry world, right? Mazal u'bracha, you transfer a big suitcase with $200,000 value of jewelry and you're shaking hands, right? Or versus when you have a written contract. So when you have a written contract, you have to bring a witness that proves the documentation, which means two witnesses for every signature. So the Gemara asked, and they said pshita, it is obvious, no analysis is necessary to arrive at this explanation of the dispute. Ma'u de tema, the Gemara responds, you may think, Rabbi sapuke mesapkale, that Rabbi has a dilemma. I al ktav yadam emeidim, if they are giving witnesses over their handwriting, or al maneh shebashtar hem meidim, or they are testifying over what? Over maneh, which is for our discussion is 100 dinar, that is in the document. Why? Because it is possible that the purpose of the testimony is to authenticate their handwriting. So therefore you have to have, according to this view, 2 witnesses to each signature. Venafka mina, and what's the real difference? And Rashi here elaborates at length. Heicha demit chad minayu, one of the signatories passed away, one of the people who signed on a document is no longer among the living. Liba'ei shnayim min hashuk le'a'id alav. You can take 2 people, literally speaking, from the street, meaning that's sufficient for us to take 2 witnesses over that one that passed to approve that this is his signature, and therefore the living, surviving second witness will not be able to combine with the other one. The im can, because if you combine them, kanafek nechei riv'ad demamuna apua dechad sahada, and that's deep and gorgeous, beautiful. The Torah tells us in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 19, verse 15, Al pi shnayim edim, according to 2 witnesses, yakum davar, we make a decision, which means half, if you talk mathematically, half of the witnesses come in each of the people who given witness. Now, think together with me. If you have 2 witnesses that approve the signature, what happened? You have one person that approve his own signature, which is what? Half away. Then that person approved that the second signature was by someone who's no longer among the living. And then you bring another fellow that prove the other same signature. You creating an atmosphere, listen, that one witness have 3/4 over quarter. How you get to that? Again. Let's call him Reuven and Shimon. Reuven and Shimon sign as witnesses the signature. Shimon is dead. Reuven approved his own signature, which is 50%. He also approved that Shimon, who's dead, signed over the second signature. But in order to validate it, you take Levi, someone else, who come in, who look at Shimon's signature and approve it. So what's happening here? You create an atmosphere of 3/4 versus quarter. Because what happened with Reuven, he is basically a half approval by his own signature, and another half, which is a quarter, approve of the other signature. So by doing so, this is a new story. V'hacha lechumra, v'hacha lechumra. So one who thought that Rabbi Yehuda Anasi, who ruled stringency here, when both signatories are alive, they must add another witness with them to authenticate the signature of the two witnesses. Why? Because it's talking about the handwriting. And he will rule stringency here. When one of the signatories died, they must add two witnesses. Why? Because the witnesses are testifying about the sum of the 100 dinars, that it is in a document. Kamash Malad. So therefore the Gemara come and teach us. The Rabbi Mifshat Pshitale. That according to Rabbi, it's obvious that it's their signature they testified, Bein lekula, Bein lechumra, both lenient, which means it's requiring only one additional witness when one of the signatories die, Bein lechumra, and also regardless to a stringency, when one of the witness or in that sense both signators are alive. So what you see here, Rashi said, according to majority of the sages, the living witness can approve only his own signature, which makes a lot of sense. But over the second person, Shimon, who is deceased, we need to have a separate two outer witnesses that approve the signature of the deceased Shimon in order to validate it. The Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, here is the proof. Shnayim achatumim ala shtar. When you have two people who sign over a document, umet echad mehem, and one of them passed away, tzrichin shnayim min hashuk le'aid alav. They require two other from the street to testify about the signature of the one who died. Bezo Rabbi lekula v'Rabanan lechumra. So you see here that the sages require two. Why? Because again, think about it. You have the concept here of 3/4 versus quarter. Because according to Rabbi, you do not need more than one witness that come out from the street to add it to the living witness to fulfill the two signature, versus the sages said this need. So let's stop for a second and think together what's going on. We have a document. Okay, we have a document. We have two people that signed this document. We call them for our discussion Reuven and Shimon. Alright? Shimon passed away. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi came in and said, look, don't make it a big deal. Okay? Reuven and Shimon are together when they make the signatures. We trust Reuven. Okay? Reuven came in and he approved his own signature. He recognized, yes, it's me. He signed. He agreed. Then he looked at Shimon, he said, do you recognize this? Yes, I recognize it. Shimon, fine, goodbye. But, since Shimon is not around, you call Levi. And Levi said, yes, it's Shimon, and it's over. The sages come in and said, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, you can't do that. You can't do that. Why I cannot do that? He says, you know what you're doing? You're creating here a situation that you have one person with so much power, which is 75% or 3/4, versus 1/4 to the other. How? Because what you're doing is basically, beside of Reuven approve his own signature, you basically take his power, his authority, his approval over something in addition. And guess what we said? We said it's all nice and done, but that cannot be valid. Guess what you have to do legally? How do you call it? Dual process, Robert rules. You have to have two outer street people outside that testified over Shimon's signature, and in that sense they are quarter and quarter each from outer, in addition to Reuven, who approved his own signature. Then it's sufficient. So after the Gemara brought us the notion of Rabbi Yehuda, that if one of the witnesses pass, you need to have two witnesses to prove the signature over that document, we go further and we ask a question. Guess what? You have sometimes situation, ve'ilei katrei. Guess what? You do not have two people out there that recognize this fellow. El achad, mai. You have only one person who recognizes the signatures. I don't know if it's a good example, but if you look at our shul, we have a corridor, right? In the corridor of our shul, you see leaders that serve our community for 38 years. So I remember vividly 12 years ago, people would talk highly about Reb Hammer, about Rabbi Rosenblatt, about all these spiritual leaders that serve 3-4 decades the synagogue, and I'll say at least 50% of the congregation remember them. Over the years, Baruch Hashem, we have many new faces, new people, other people, new, total different. I can't say all, but almost all of them never met or never have a privilege to know anything about these two leaders. Alright? So if you stand today at 2015 and you talk about the late Reb Hammer or even the late Rabbi Rosenblatt, you stand on a, I will say, Shabbat or the high holidays, you have several hundreds of people. You talk about their influence in the community. I bet 25%, maybe 20%, remember them. That's the reality of life. It's nothing bad or good, it's just the way it is. Okay? So here we have a situation, you're walking out the street and you are looking for two people who recognize the deceased signature and they are qualified witnesses, we're accepting them, etc. Guess what happened? We're searching and searching and searching and we find only one person that recognizes it. So here is a very unique situation. You have the living witness that recognized beside of his own signature also the signature of the second one, and you have only one person from outside who recognizes the signature of the deceased. So what do you do with this document? Sometimes this document is crucial because it's affected the future and you need to make decisions. Amar Abaye come in to rescue and he said, Lichtov Chatimat Yadei Achaspa. So Abaye said, let the surviving witness write his signature on an earthenware shard, Veshadeilei bevet dina, and guess what? And he cast it into the court, Umachzekelei beidina. So the bet din, rabbinic court, basically juxtapose. They ratified the document by seeing that it is his signature. Velo tzarich ihu le'ashudei chatimat yadei, and he does not need to testify and authenticate his signature. Ve'azil ihu ve'hai umeshadei aidach. He and other witness go and testify to authenticate the other signature of the deceased witness. So in that case, even according to the sages, one additional witness is sufficient. Now imagine a situation that you're talking about the person who is very aloof, meaning he is very preserved, he's not friendly, he doesn't have anybody in the world, you have only one single person that friend with him. Okay? But he doesn't have any friends. So what are you doing now? So you have that person that recognized the signature of the deceased. So you have here half and a half. Half is the other party that recognize themselves and this one, and then the outer person that recognize the signature of the deceased. But the Gemara said, V'davka achaspa. And he writes his signature for the purpose of comparison specifically on an earthenware shard. Avala megilta, if you have the shtar, like the scroll that's written on parchment, lo, you can't do it. Why? Dilma mashkach lainish delo ma'alei, v'chalta vilavei ma'idebay. Maybe you have unscrupulous person, not trustworthy. Guess what? He see a document that said that Mr. A owned to Mr. B $100,000. Now imagine if Mr. A have endless businesses and he really do not remember all the details to whom he signed what. This unscrupulous person take that. He add in addition on the top of the signature his name, and he come in and sue that person for 100,000, right? Utnan, we learn in the Mishna, in Tractate Bava Batra, page 175b, Hotzi alav ktav yado. If you have a creditor produce a document about another writing in the other person's handwriting, in which it is written, or it's written, Shehu chayav lo, that the other person owes him money. So even if there are no witnesses, he is obligated to pay. Goveh min nechasim neichorim. So what happened is, the claimant may collect payment from unsold property. So in that sense, hypothetically speaking, is able to collect payment or repayment of a loan that is documented on the promissory note signed by two witnesses, even from the borrower's land that was sold. So with the document signed by the guy who owed, the creditor may collect payment from unsold property. So because you have a very serious chance for people to take advantage and fool around and deceive with the signature on the parchment, one provide a signature sample writing on earthquake. So it's a story we call about the rabbis, the Gavad, the Av Bet Din of the Ada, who's one of the rabbis that wrote for me a beautiful Haskama, letter of approbation, in 87 when I wrote my books in Hebrew. So the story goes that someone came to the Gavad, to the rabbis, and he said, you know, people come to me and say that I owe, let's say for example, $50,000, which is a lot of money in those years, and I never borrow, I don't know how they get it, and they show me that I signed it, and I have no clue, I'm a businessman, I don't remember I signed this, so what should I do? So Rabbi said to him, you know what, go home and come back in like a day or two, let me figure it out. 2 days later, the fellow came back. And he said to him, the rabbis show you the wisdom of the sages. He said to him, you have a big library? He said, sure. You know, every observant Jew, they have a nice size library. That's part of our lives, right? He said, by any chance, anybody borrow books from you? That you have maybe your name on a book or something? He said, yeah, it's possible. People come, goes, borrow books, etc., etc. So he said, it's a serious possibility that someone just took the first page of one of those borrow books and abuse your signature. That's the painful reality. I can say I heard it one from Rav Kostelitz, but it happened also to my uncle, that they have a very old book. I don't remember if it's the Noam Elimelech of one of the greatest Hasidic books. Goes back, who knows, 200 years ago. And one of the unscrupulous people, you know, sometimes people dress with a very religious appearance, but they are not. And guess what? The fellow came and he said, can I look at these certain books? And the moment he turned around, the fellow disappeared. And he left the book on the table, but he cut the first page. In Judaica, one of the biggest crooks that you see in the world, they try to sell you or buy from you books that are missing the cover page. What they do, and it's a big market, I understand, is to just take the first page, which sometimes carry a very important signatures, because in those years people signed the name on the front page of the book, and it's a market for that. So unfortunately it can happen with crooks that they abuse that way. Anyway, אמר רב יהודה אמר שמואל, הלכה כדברי חכמים, that they said it is sufficient that each of them testified over his signature. You do not need one that testified over the signature of the other. So the Gemara challenged that and said, Pshita, that's obvious. Why? Yachid verabim, halacha kerabim. When you have one individual sage and you have multiple sages, you go by the majority of the vote. So what you need to extrapolate here and tells us that the halacha follow the majority of the sages. So the Gemara responds and said, Mahu detema, you may say, halacha kerabim mechavero, ve'afilu mechaverav. You may say that halacha is rule according to the opinion of Rabbi Dr. in dispute of his colleague. That there is also a principle that the halacha is rule according to the opinion even when he agree with his multiple of colleagues. And that's something that the Gemara in Bava Batra 122 have a discussion. If that's correct when it comes to Rabbi Dr. Kamash Melan, here they come and Chidush, give us something that we are total surprised to hear that what? That halacha follow the majority of the sages. Siman Nachnad Chad, that's the acronym, the abbreviation of three view who is the Amorah that challenged Rabbi Yehuda. אמר לרב חיננה בר חייא לרב יהודה, ואמר לרב יהודה בר יהודה לרב יהודה, ואמר לרב חייא בר יהודה לרב יהודה. ומי אמר שמואל אחי? It is true that Shmuel said that halacha follow the majority of the sages. וההוא שטרה ונפיק מבית דינא דמר שמואל. It was a one document that came from the rabbinic court of Mar Shmuel. והווה כתיב בי, it was written in the language of that rabbinic court. מדעתה רב ענן בר חייא והסהיד החתימות ידי. Since Rav Anan bar Chiya came before us and he gave a testimony over the signature, ve'ad dechad de'imei, and also the witness, in addition, the one who is with us, umanu, and who is he? Rav Chanan bar Abba, umi de'ata Rav Chanan bar Abba, ve'asid hachatimot yedei ve'ad echad imei, umanu Rav Anan bar Chiya, ay ishranoi ve'kiyamnoi kedechaze. We approve the document properly, meaning Shmuel that require that each of the witness need to sign over his signature and also the others. Follow Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, Amar lei, ahu shtara diatmei hava. This is a document that involved with the orphan. As you know, when it's come to orphan, we have the concept of what? Of apotropos. You have a guardian, someone that the court assigned to be in charge for those people who unfortunately are orphaned, right? V'cha Shmuel levedin to'im. Shmuel was concerned that the Bet Din, perhaps there is court that holds that in general the halacha is ruled according to the opinion of Rabbi Dr in dispute of his colleague. סבר שמואל, וסבר שמואל דילמה איקרא דסבירא להלכה כרבי מחברו ולא מחבריו, ובהא אפילו מחבריו. So Shmuel was not concerned that it will be a Bet Din that disputed the majority against majority, but he was concerned that they may misconstrue and follow the halacha according to Rabbi Dr. Why? Because rationally speaking, the Rashba said, it's appear more logical to follow that way. Savar Aved Ravcha, Shmuel hold that in a sense the fellow said, I will perform ratification of the document in an expensive manner. Okay, so the Ritva said that's more rational to say that their signature is not. The guy wants to make sure that the orphans will not lose money. So basically the Bet Din, the rabbinic court, take this apotropos, the fellow who is guardian for this orphan, and since it's his obligation to take care of them, he wants to make sure that the witness will not lose money, the orphans will not lose money to which they are entitled. So that's the reason we did it. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Ed Vedayan Mitztarfin. Here is the concept, it's called handpick. You have two people. You have the witness and you have one of the rabbinic judges, the Dayan. So they sign off document. Now the problem is that the borrower said that everything was fake. It's not real. So here it's okay to have two, which is one of the witnesses and one of the rabbinic judges. Each of them approve their signature, and they can combine, Rashi said, to approve that document. So it means the way that Tosfot elaborates, and he said, according to the view of the sages, the witness that confirmed this loan, he confirmed his part, his signature part of that document, and the judge approved of that document, and basically since you combine the two, that proof that document. That's the way the Rosh brought, as well as Rabbeinu Yoina. Amarami Bar Chama, Kama me'alya hashmata. How great, how excellent is this halacha. Amarava Maimar Yuta. What's the special in this halacha? Mai de kamashid sahada, lo kamashid dayana, which is the one that the witness give a witness. It's not the one that the judge approved. The same the other way. Mai de kamashid dayana, lo kamashid sayada, and the one on which the judge testified, the witness does not testify. There are not two witnesses testifying to either matter. So how do you combine their witnesses? So the Maharam Shif and the Rashash said, even there is a room here to believe in and to approve these documents by having these witnesses, it's very unlikely to say that the sages are lenient to combine two witnesses, two testimony that have a total different subject matter. So the Gemara basically rejected the word of Rabbi Yehuda. Ela ki ata Rami bar Yechezkel, when he came to Babylon from Eretz Israel, Amar lo tetzaytinu la'anekla ledechai liYehuda achi mishmei deShmuel. Do not listen to what my brother Yehuda said on behalf of Shmuel, which is, Rashi said, based on the Gemara in Kiddushin 32, that Rami bar Yechezkel was the brother of Rav Yehuda. He most probably was born in Babylon and he was a student of Rav and Shmuel, and then he made Aliyah, and he went to Eretz Israel, and then he returned to Babylon. So when he returned to Babylon, he disputed several halachot that Rav Yehuda said in the name of Rav and Shmuel. See more on that in Gemara in Chulin 44. So he said, Ed and Dayan, the witness and the rabbinic judge, they cannot combine to prove the document. So Rabbeinu Nisim, the Ran, said, in order to approve this document, you need to have the two witnesses of that document, or the two witnesses of the two judges, in order to have two witnesses of either the loan or the fulfillment of the loan. The Siftei Kohen, the Shach, on Choshen Mishpat 46, elaborate and said that each of them has a different role, meaning the judge has his role and the witness has a role. So that's the issue, that you cannot combine the two different roles to validate a final decision of a document. 21b. Ikla Ravnai Achua de Rabbi Chia bar Abba Lemizban Shum Shemi. So he went, this Ravnai was a brother of Rav Chia bar Abba, and he went to a place in order to purchase sesame. Ve'amar, and he said, Hache Amar Shmuel. This is what Shmuel said. Ed ve'dayan mitztarfim. You can have a combination of a witness and a judge to approve it. So, meaning, if you have a judge, the sign off of the fulfillment of that document, they approve that this is a real document and not a fake one. Amar Ameimar, Kama me'alya hashmata. How great, how excellent is this halacha. Amar le Rav Ashi le Ameimar, Mishum dekal savua deimach at nam mekalasla. Because the father of your mother, Rami Bar Chama, praised this halacha, that he heard from Rabbi Yehuda, you also praise it. Kvar parcha Rava. Rava already refuted it, this statement, and he proved that it wasn't correct. That's basically the way Rashi tells us. Tosfot 3, they have a different here, and he said that it was several generations later. Anyway, more on that is Gemara in Kiddushin 72b. Amar Rav Safra, Amar Rabbi Abba, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak bar Shmuel bar Marta, Amar Rav Huna, ve'amre la Amar Rav Huna, Amar Rav. Now dealing with Hilchot Kiyum Shtarot, which means some of the judges recognize the signature of their witnesses, while others not. That's called Ashtera or Hanpek. So, what it's written here, that Shlosha sheyashvu lekayem et hashtar. You have the three rabbinic judges. As you know, that's the odd number, you need to have three. They sit in a session of rabbinic court, and they talk about the exercising the right of fulfillment that document. Lekayem et hashtar. Ushnayim makirin chatimot yedei edim, and two of the judges recognize the signature of the hand of those witnesses. Ve'echad eno mekir, and one of them did not recognize the signature. עד שלא חתמו, מעידים בפניו וחותם. As long as the two judges that recognize the signature did not sign, so they can testify before the third one, and he joined them. מי שחתמו, but after the two judges sign, they recognize those signature, and מעידים בפניו וחותם. They cannot have the third one that joined them with the signature. Why? Because in that case, it means that the two judges sign first over something that is untruthful, which is the language that it was original written. It's well known that the whole three knows these witnesses, the signature, and at the time they signed, it was not correct. So the Gemara asks, Umikadvinan, is that correct to write this before we have the approve of the signatures? Ve'amar Rav Papi Mishmei de Rava, Hai Asharta de Dayane. This is the written proof of the judges. דנכתב מקמי דניחבו סהדי החתימת ידייהו, that it's written before the witnesses approve their signatures. Psula, and Rashi tells us here it's a well known at the judges that those witnesses that sign, they come and testified over their signatures. Because before they gave a testimony, the judges wrote in the session of the three judges, we are, and this document come before us, Rashi said, and this fellow and the other fellow came before us to have their signature, and we approve it, and that document. So the Gemara said, Psula de mitchaze keshikra, because it appear as lie, as untruthful. So even the judges sign only after they testified before them, but the asharta itself, by its mere fact that it's written, is invalid. Why? Because it's appear as something that it's not true. Because it is written here that the witness over the signatures before they testified. Hachanami mitchazei keshikra. Here also it appears as untrue. Why? Because they said that this proof of the signature is known to the three judges before they known to the third one. אלא אימה עד שלא כתבו מעידין בפניו וחותם. משכתבו אין מעידין בפניו וחותם. So they said, as long as they did not write it, so they may not testify before him and have him sign the ratification. But the moment that they finally write it, so they can do it. So you see here, since when the first two judges signed the ratification, there were not form of three, and therefore it's not valid. It appears as not true. So Shma Mina Tlat. You conclude from this statement of Rav Huna three important halachot. Shma Mina, you derive from that. Ed Naasa Dayan, a witness potentially can be a judge, which means he can judge over something that he was witness over, and that's follow the word of Rav Huna. After the two judges testified over the signature, they in themselves sign as judges. ושמע מינה, דיינים המכירים חתימות ידי העדים, אינם צריכים להעיד בפניהם. You derive from that also that judges who recognize the signatures of the witness do not require other witness to testify before them. ושמע מינה, you also conclude from that, דיינים שאינם מכירים חתימות ידי עדים, judges who do not recognize the signatures of their witnesses, צריכים להעיד בפני כל אחד ואחד. They are required to testify before each and every one of them, and no judge may issue a ruling based on testimony brought before the other judges. So the Gemara rejected the last two notions. Matkif la Rav Ashi challenged that, and he said, Bishlama edna sedayan shaminan mina. We understand that the witness can become a judge. We understand from this statement of Rav Huna that you do not differentiate between this situation, the others. אלא הדיינים המכירים חתימות ידי עדים, אין צריכים להעיד בפניהם. The judges who recognize the signatures of those witnesses, you do not need to testify before them. דילמה, לעולם אין מלאך צריכים. I will say that they actually judges require witnesses to testify before them. Veshane hacha, here, and this situation is different. But the requirement of the statement of testimony is fulfilled with the testimony of the two judges before one judge who did not recognize the signatures. However, in the case where there is no statement of testimony at all, there could be no ratification of the document. So, we continue by saying, ודיינים שאינם מכירים חתימות ידי עדים, if you have judges that not recognize the signatures of witnesses, צריכים להעיד בפני כל אחד ואחד. So they're required to testify before each and every one of them. דילמה לעולם אין מלאך אין צריכים. You may conclude that they do not require to testify before each and every judge. Veshane acha, and here in this case is totally different, where it is not for the testimony of the two judges before the third judge. The requirement is total difference, which is because because the whole idea of the testimony will not be fulfilled, which means that when you have other testimony, so one is depend on the knowledge of others in order to ratify the document. Yativ Rabbi Abba. So now we go by the first one, that the proof of Rabbi Huna remained. So Rabbi Abba was set, וכאמר להשמטה דעדנה סדיין. And he teach this halacha that the witness can become a judge. So הייתי ברב ספרא לרב אדבא, Rav Safra challenged that in regards to halacha of Kiddush HaChodesh. As you know, the Torah tells us in the book of Shmot, chapter 12, and you see it in Gemara in Rosh Hashanah, page 25b, Ra'uhu shlosha, if three people saw the new moon, Vehen bet din, and these three happened to be the judges of the Supreme Rabbinic Court, which is 3 out of the 71 judges that sitting in the Sanhedrin, the Supreme Rabbinic Court, that they are qualified to sanctify the new month. Yamdu shnayim, So 2 out of 3 should stand before the court. ויושיבו מחבריהם, and they put other 2 judges that did not see the new moon, אצל היחיד, together with a single one that was with them. So now you have a beit din of 3 judges, ויעידו בפניהם, and they testified before them, ויאמרו, and they should say, מקודש החודש, מקודש. Sanctified is the month, sanctified. So 2 others must join the original judge to form a tribunal of 3 judges. Why? שאין היחיד נאמן על ידי עצמו, because individual judge is not deemed credible to sanctify the month by himself. Wow. So we said, ואיסל כדעתך דעד נעשה דיין, and if you tell me that the witness can become a judge, so למה ליכו להי? Why you need all of this? ליתבו בדוכתיהו וליקדשי. Let the 3 judges remain seated in their place and sanctify the month, as they can be both witnesses and judges. Omar le Rav Ada said to Rav Safra, Af ledidi kashya li, the Mishnah is also difficult for me to comprehend. ושאלתי לרב יצחק בר שמואל בר מטה, ורב יצחק לרב הונא, ורב הונא לחייא ברב, ורב חייא ברב לרב, ואומר לו, הנח לעדות החודש דאורייתא. He said, leave the case of testimony of sanctified of the new month, because it's mandated by Torah law, and the guidelines are more stringent, and the requirement וקיום שטרות דרבנן, and all this idea of ratification of document is mandated by rabbinic law, where the guidelines are more lenient. So in that case, witness can become a judge. So you see here the huge difference between the 2. Now, biblically speaking, Rashi explained to us that document that you have 2 witnesses, it's a valid document. Why? It's very unlikely that people are so rude and unscrupulous to fake the signature of 2 witnesses. But the sages anyway put those boundaries. When it's come to kiyum shtarot, when it's come to this ratification of documents, it's rabbinic, so they are more lenient. The Ktsot HaChoshen said that it's a huge differentiation between the biblical concept and the rabbinic. We allow to be more lenient when it's a rabbinic boundaries. Even biblically speaking, the whole idea of witness is not valid. It's only when it comes to rabbinic court. But if a person sees something and you don't need his testimony, he can testify over that. So when it's come to the sanctification of the new month, only the 2 that witnesses, they see the new moon, they are basically not qualified to be part of the court session. But the 3rd one that saw the new moon but doesn't need to testify before the court, he is befitting to sit in the court session. Just remember Tosfot comment that all of that applies something that's not involved with the capital punishment or anything related to Dinei Nefashot. Because Dinei Nefashot, you need to find always people whose absolute objective and has not any form of any attachment by any means. Amar Rabbi Abba, Amar Rav Huna, Amar Rav, 3 שישבו לקיים את השטר. You have 3 rabbinic judges that convened as a tribunal to ratify the document. וקרא ערער על אחד מהם, and the person raised the challenge with regard to the fitness of one of them to serve as a judge, עד שלא חתמו, מעידים עליו וחותם. As long as they did not sign, so they may testify about this, and he signed. משחתמו, once they signed their ratification, אין מעידים עליו וחותם, they may no longer testify about his witness, and thereby enable him to sign the ratification. Only they sign, their testimony is no longer impartial because there is a conflict of interest, as they seek to avoid being associated with a tribunal tainted by an unfit judge. Ar demai. So what challenge of what sort this halacha stated? Ar de gazlenuta. If you tell me that it's an allegation, that it's a theft, so it means that they said that in order to disqualify someone, you need to have two witnesses that prove it. Because we in general take people, trust people. Only when you have two kosher witnesses, they can challenge that. That's the way Rashi tells us. So how, even if they still did not, these two judges did not sign, how they can approve it? So if you base the allegation of theft, 22, trei utrei ninhu, when these witnesses are who testified that he is unfit, and the judges who testify that he is fit are two witnesses, and two witnesses who contradict them, and in that case the allegation of theft is not completely eliminated. So you can't tell me that that's what Rav said. Tosfot challenged that. Tosfot said, so since this challenge between the two group of witnesses leave the whole session in a big quandary, so you have to have the assumption that the judge is right and is befitting to have this court session. So the Tosfot brought from Rabbeinu Hananel total different avenue of understanding. The Ramban said that because the moment you enter the domain of Safek, then you have an issue with that. When you have allegation, if you tell me that they challenge because a flawed lineage, he is a Canaanite slave and therefore unfit to serve a judge. So even they cited Gilui Milta Be'almau. This is only, Tosfot said that if they come to Bedin only to speak about his lineage, it's not necessarily connected to the witness. You have to say that they challenge based on the allegation of theft. And the two judges said, we knew that he changed his way and he repented and is now fit to serve as a judge. So you see here that the testimony does not contradict the original testimony that he is guilty of theft. Amar Rabbi Zeira, that's another halacha in regard to Kiyum Shtarot. Amar Rabbi Zeira, Amilta mi Rabbi Abba Shmiali, Vilav Rabbi Abba de min Ako Shchachta, that he remind me after time, I almost forgot all of that. And he said, Shlosha, if the three judges, שישבו לקיים את השטר, if three judges that sit to the session to fulfill this document, umet echad mehem, and one of them, before he was able to sign, he passed, צריכים למכתב, they have to add this line, and they have to say, במותיו תלתה הווינה, v'chad leitohi. We originally convened in a session of three judges, and one of the judges is no longer among the living. So in that way it is clear that although only two judges signed, the document was ratified by three judges. Omar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak v'i katav bei shtara dena nafak lekadmana beidina tu lo tzarich. You don't need to elaborate anymore, because everyone knows that you cannot call a bet din less than 3 judges, and they all understand that there are 3 judges and sign only 2 because one of them passed. So Bedilma Bedin Chatzufu. So you may say maybe it's the imputed court. וחשמואל דאמר שמואל שניים שדנו דיהם דין אלא שנקרא בדין חצוף. If you have Shmuel hold that biblically speaking it's enough to have 1 or 2 judges to deal with the monetary disputation, but there is a rabbinic boundaries, rabbinic decree that they should have 3 in the court session. So meaning if it was under certain circumstance only 1 judge or 2 judges, b'diavad, after the fact, it's still the ruling accepted, but it's called, based on the way Rashi put it on Sanhedrin, page 3, bedin chatzuf, lucidly meaning a rude bet din, right? Because they basically violated the rabbinic decree. So the halacha is not follow Shmuel. Usually if there's only 2 instead of 3, it's not affected. That's the beginning of Sanhedrin. You see it also in the Choshen Mishpat, chapter 3. Now, here, since according to Shmuel, they are considering a rabbinic court, if they write in the language that Rav Nachman said, it will not be a proof that there are 3. You know why? Because someone who see it, he hold that there are only 2. And they call themselves as a bet din because they hold the same Shmuel, and since the halacha does not follow the Shmuel, so someone who see the Ritva said, he basically disqualified the whole kiyum, the whole fulfillment of that rules. Tosfot challenged that in Dibur Matchil Bedilma. So the Chtiv Bey, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak responded and said the Gemara responded and he said Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak meant to say that it was written in that document, for example, Beit Dina de Rabana Ashi, that this is the court of our teacher of Ashi, which presumably conforms to rabbinic protocol, and said the Dilma. So the Gemara asks, if that's the case, maybe Rabbanan de Rav Ashi ki Shmuel svira lo, the sages of the court of the Rav Ashi hold in accordance of the opinion of Shmuel, and they are convened an impudent court Chatzuf, whose ruling is binding. The Chtivei, because it's written there, it's written clearly before us, the court of our teacher of Asi, V'amar la Rabbana Ashi, and our teacher of Asi said to us how to rectify the document.